Okay, I know this isn't the first time that I mistreated potions like booze, but you gotta wonder what exactly is the alcoholic content of it, and should you be able to ride a broom afterwards? Continuing right from where we left off last week, Xiaoha had managed to reverse Teletina's mana infection. Her personal knight was a little too excited about this, but at least we got some good reaction faces out of the princess. Still, Idra did take notice of her rival's countermeasures for mana seeds, and not too surprisingly, this shady mage had been researching the shady seeds. This was because their kingdom was planning on militarizing the mana seeds. Already, this is a better political conspiracy plot than Captain America Brave New World. Like, I'm not even kidding, as not only have I heard that that film has about as much political intrigue as the crazy guy at the bus stop, but Xiaoha and Idra had legitimately a good back and forth about their goals and ideals to improve their kingdom. To do this, they first did some good world building by establishing how the magical licensing system of this world worked, in that while people were free to practice established spells as much as they wanted, they needed to register with the government before they could do their own R&D. And even then, their findings couldn't be legally shared with the rest of the kingdom unless they got approval from the Sorcery Tower, i.e. another branch of the government led by Xiaoha. This of course meant that she pretty much controlled all of the magic in their kingdom, which according to Idro, she was just going to let the upper crust and military monopolize it all for themselves. Thus, Idra wanted to push for more people to have more freedom to exchange their ideas and findings to improve everyone else's lives. Now, of course, on paper, all that sounds well and good, but then Xiaohe brought up a lot of good counterpoints, specifically in regards to the main legitimate faults of the previous administration, i.e. Idra's father's policies, that you could certainly correlate with a lot of things IRL. Because of their loose governing and oversight, not only were a ton of faulty magical products released on the market, which I remind you is basically the technology of this world, but there were also a ton of incidents where they were misused like guns for even some very unpleasant crimes. In short, Idra and her father's ideals were highly predicated on the idea that everyone, with no limitations, could just correlate and move towards one similar goal, which is simply something that is never going to happen. All living beings are ultimately, by their very nature, self-serving creatures that need boundaries and rules in order to get anything done right. People can complain about their governments being corrupt or draconian as much as they want, which, don't get me wrong, there will always be something wrong with the people at the top, but at the same time, they are ultimately unnecessary evil, emphasis on the evil part. Xiaoha might be a bitch, but she's a bitch with a very good point. And all of this wasn't lost on Togo, who did end up siding a bit with Xiaoha, and did pick up on how just that little bit might have felt like a total betrayal to Idra in a really nicely done cut here where you could just see her pure anger. She tried to fly off, but of course Togo gave chase on his knockoff Ginkauken. During their chase, Idra might have projected a little here and even kind of admitted that her dreams were a tad bit too ideal, but Togo tried to show how he didn't entirely see it that way. Well, she's dead. Nah, she somehow survived. I guess she used those two convenient airbags on her chest. But anyway, after making up, he was able to clarify what he was going to say about how they could achieve her dreams by working with everyone, including Xiaoha. Yeah, in spite of, or maybe even really because of his absolute obsession with bonds, Togo was able to see things from a more pragmatic standpoint. Part of that might have been because he came from a highly governed country like Japan, but still, the fact that he was able to make as many bonds as he did proved that people can work within systems rather than against them. In fact, Idra even admitted that she had a magical license and did approve of it as at least a means of safety. It's just that she kind of shut out anything that went against her father's ideals, be it Togo or even the other tower mages, who did have much more stable job security than they ever did under him, as they didn't have to constantly worry about someone's magical toaster oven blowing up and forcing them to file compensations. But yeah, this led to a good moment where she started to throw out ideas that could actually work within Xiaoha's governing that would be a lot more effective than trying to completely replace one problematic governing system with another. Yeah, needless to say, this is the kind of writing that I really get into, as not only is it smart and thought provoking, it also does encourage people to be more proactive rather than reductive. And of course, for the sake of entertainment, it can be used as a good means of character building, as Idra clearly started to quite literally fall for Togo, or maybe it was the other way around. Come on, Kruger, don't cockblock the kid right now. But yeah, before his lucky skibby moment, Toko had a good exchange with Loji, where he thanked him for saving him in the previous episode. It not only had admittedly some good tsundering from him, but also this.
でももう二度とやらないでくれ。今のは貴様の声か。
Yeah, you wouldn't think this is the VA's first major role ever. And thankfully, they did bring back up the idea that Togo unintentionally shattered their previous beliefs that heaven was a thing by taking them to outer space. Again, it is a bit of a smaller detail in the grand scheme of things, but it is still very poignant, especially for the character himself. However, this was when Togo was teleported to Idra's bath, where he explained how their changers also worked as teleportation devices through another flashback to his series, where he warped in his whole team to help him when they were mostly busy with their own stuff. Also, hi Kyoryu Blue, playing random monster of the week. Hey, if you had been here about a month ago, you could have hooked up with Canderella again. But yeah, speaking of that episode, he explained how their changers were powered by bond energy and attracted to other sources of it, which the monomel they collected seemed to give off. And all of this was explained in the most Sentai way possible by their prof with a lot of pseudoscience. Basically, bond energy allowed for the power of creation, which would explain how Togo was able to get the Kizuna Kaiser to this Isekai, as it wasn't really the original, as dimensional teleportation was impossible, but more likely his own recreation of it. Regardless, it was clearly a great power that somehow resonated with the monometal, so Idra figured that they should do some testing by improving their bonds. I mean, they purposely left things very ambiguous, but Teltina still caught on to the fact that they might have possibly, bond merged. Seriously, the show has kind of ruined Doggy Kruger for me. Anyway, they went to see Teltina's father, aka the king, who tried to discourage his daughter's quest, but she quickly pointed out how there would still be many out there who would disregard even a royal proclamation to turn in their monoseeds. Thus, they were allowed to continue, but they also had to deal with her brother, Dariel, who was your stereotypical war-hungry asshole. Yep, he was the one really pushing for the militarization of monoseeds in order to invade and annex demi-human nations, which, yeah, is not only immoral, but also stupidly dangerous because they know the Demon Queen's kin could manipulate them. So yeah, there are just some tropes that we could never really escape in these sorts of stories, but at least he's still better than Red Hulk. With that, the party was sent out to recover the seeds, though not before we got more Teltina lore dumps, like apparently how she used to be a tomboy and looked a lot cuter with pigtails. She also might have been emulating another one of her brothers named Altio, who wasn't there for some reason. Also notably, Teltina referred to him as Aniki, which is a more informal yet familiar way of referring to an older brother than Onisama, like she did with General Thunder Forehead here. Afterwards, Idra tried to hand off her earlier suggestions to Xiaoha, but between these two, it more just devolved into a bitch off. Still, she said she'd hear her out under a condition, and the episode just kind of ended there. I mean, there was a post-credit scene where they seemed to go to a desert, but yeah, that was an awkward way to just end an episode. That aside, this is still an excellent outing with a lot of world building and even some good character building. The political intrigue was well done, as it really highlighted the pros and cons of the ideals of both the protagonist and antagonist of the story. Because even in fantasy worlds, there will always be plenty of shades of grey, just like in real life. Even though I know he didn't have anything to do with the original manga, this series really does feel like something that the head writer, Atsuhiro Tomioka, would write specifically for the Battle Spirits franchise. Yeah, while at first it looks like your typical TCG anime, it also involves a lot of fantasy world politics in seasons like the Danbashin Saga and Sword Eyes, which we cover for this channel. In those shows, not only could you draw a lot of real world parallels, but they also focused on the idea that people needed to work with their governments rather than just against them all the time. After all, not only is completely rehauling a governing system impractical, but these sorts of issues do involve a lot of shades of gray. While Shaha seemed to, and likely was, leaning unfairly in favor of the upper classes, she also brought up a ton of good points over how inherently flawed Idra's father's trust-based system was. And this led to some good character development for Idra herself, who needed to accept the fact that her old man's idealism was kind of crock. After all, it was likely those very ideals that made her unable to cooperate with others, like her initial adventure candidates, or the other tower mages, who were kind of jerky, but also right to want job security for everyone. It's a good bit of irony showing how by sticking too closely to her father's goals of uniting everyone, it was actually isolating her, unlike Togo, who recognized how these things do have to be dealt with pragmatically, which, yeah, is already moving him up into the top tier of Reds for me. Though, on that note, yeah, it is also really cute that their relationship has developed to the point that they might have bond merged. And overall, while this week had no real fights at all, it didn't really need them at all, as there was just good writing here with a lot of good political talk and character development. If you want to get anything done, sometimes you just need to learn how to work with people and their schedules. I mean, boundaries are legit important. Thank you for watching, and if you're wondering about a certain other Sentai that just started and whether or not we'll do a full review of it, unfortunately, no, our schedule's kind of full as is. Don't get me wrong, I really did enjoy this first episode, and will likely make a short review of it, but right now, at least, I'm still more invested in other shows. So, look forward to Kamen Rider Gav tomorrow, and until then, don't fail for now, friends. Always when I'm recording. Hello? Oh, drinks night? Well, hold on, let me just check my schedule.